What's up, guys? I'm here with Dr. Derek Garza. He's a PT out of Orange County, California. Specializes in plyometrics, speed development, and also ACL rehab. So I'm really looking forward to talking about all those topics with him today. I think we're going to do a little bit of all of those things. We're going to get some plyos in, a little sprint or excel work in, probably hit some quads. So we'll touch on all of the things. If you like this episode, if you want to get in touch with Derek, Derek's Insta is dr.derekpt. If you have questions for him, if you want his help with rehab, anything like that, feel free to shoot him a DM. But Derek, thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So we were both at the Coach 'em Up conference yesterday. One of the presentations from Vernon Griffith, he was talking about the importance of intent behind exercises. You know, it's not just like programming an exercise, but how you do it, how you execute it matters a ton. I think plyos are a great example of that. Absolutely. I see some people doing plyometrics and I'm like, I don't know if you're getting out of that what you think you're getting out of that. Just like standard pogo hops, like one of the classic plyos. Yep. I see a lot of just like this kind of like slow, like long ground contact time jump, as opposed to that like more aggressive, like attack the floor. My question for you is like, how do you get someone doing plyos with the right intent?
Yeah, let me start off with when you're training and you're getting into it and you are a bit lazier with it and there is increased ground contact time, I don't love that version. It's going to take away from the adaptations that we're looking for. I think that there is a space for it in sport because you'll see it a lot with basketball players. When you're going up for rebounds, like you're not thinking about that. Like you're getting up, you're moving, but overall, yeah, the intent and the attack behind it is just going to put your foot in a way better position. So when I'm coaching it, I want someone that's going to land more around the midfoot, right? So just behind the ball of their foot. And then in terms of building it out, if that doesn't grab of like, hey, this is what I'm expecting. Here's the sound that I'm looking for, like that nice crisp pop off the ground. If we're not getting that over some reps, then I'm going to change what the stimulus is to force them to have to pop off of the ground. So it might be a forward to a backward pop. I might take away a leg and force them to have to hit off the ground. So there's a few other elements to plyos that I'll add in where they don't really have a choice.
Yeah.
So that's more or less what I'm looking at. Yeah, but intent is super important.
It can be tougher on different surfaces, but if I have someone on a hard surface like wood, I use just sound a lot of like, I want it to sound like this.
Yeah, nice and
I feel like it's kind of hard to mess up if you get the right sound, but you can't always get that kind of like slapping or snapping sound if you're out on like turf or grass or something like that. But in general, how important do you think surface is for plyos? Like, is it important that you do plyos on different surfaces, or is there a preference you have for different types?
Yeah, this will show up across sports, especially. So like your track athletes, your volleyball players, your basketball players are likely going to be a little bit more stiff around the ankle complex. And then when you get into some of the field sports, not as much. And that's not saying that there's always a huge gap, but it's a noticeable one. And usually I want to prepare the athlete for whatever surface they're going to be on, right? So, I'm going to want the basketball player to be on a stiffer surface, but it also depends on where are we at in season, where's the goal, do they have an injury, right? So if we're working through an injury, I might start on a softer surface and build them up.
Yeah.
Some days, if the athlete's beat up, let's get off of the hard surface and go back to a soft surface. So it's really context dependent on how I use it. But absolutely, I think surface does matter and does play a role. Just what is your goal out of the session and what do you need from this athlete specifically?
Do you think it makes big enough of a difference that like if I usually do it on turf and then all of a sudden I move to the basketball court, am I going to be like dramatically more wrecked by that, or is it kind of subtle?
No, I think that one's a bit more subtle. I wouldn't say dramatically wrecked at all. I think the basketball court has a good amount of give.
Yeah.
Versus if you were to go from turf to concrete, that might be a completely different story.
Gotcha.
But it would be to me anyway, it would be very similar to like if I were to just go out and just start running on concrete and I go and pull, several miles and I'm not trained on distance running, my calves are going to be just like blown up. Everything's going to be sore.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think in that regard, that's a bit of a drastic difference, but on the basketball court, it shouldn't be too bad. You just have to mind volume and what the workout is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Since you're the plyo expert, will you show me like what you want a set of good pogos to look like? Or if you were coaching me through pogos, like give me the demo, like key points for just getting someone to do good pogo hops for the first time.
So again, landing at that midfoot portion. Sometimes if people are still kind of struggling and they're more toey, I'll tell them like, hey, lift the toes, lift the toes. So build it up and then bring it back down. I think what gets people a lot is not so much just the attack. Like I think that people can grasp. It's how hard they're hitting and then the timing for when they need to do it again.
What I noticed watching you compared to, I think, when I've done it, is I noticed on like your most aggressive ones, you were even getting like your knee into it a little bit, I think. Like you were kind of attacking with your whole leg, whereas I think I've sometimes kept my whole leg kind of stiff. Mm-hmm. Do you coach that at all in terms of like how much knee and maybe hip stiffness or bend you get into it versus straight leg?
Not all the time. Some are going to express a little bit differently. I think traditionally my ground contact time is a little bit longer.
Sure, yeah.
Whereas someone else, their ground contact time might be a little bit snappier, so they might not be in that same sort of flex position. But I think it's just profile, like athlete profiling. So I won't always train that or go into that so heavy. If as long as we're still hitting our numbers and we're still within a good quality range, what's the RSI? Like, what are we doing as far as reactive strength index? What's their timing like getting off the ground?
Yeah.
What's the flight time?
Just to give people some context of like, why is this kind of stuff important? Like, what is the point in doing plyos at all? Both for like general population people, like how do you approach getting them to do it? And then for like athletes, team sport, track, that kind of stuff. Like why do plyos for those different populations?
Okay, so let's go with Gen Pop. I like to add plyometrics for general populations for a number of reasons. A lot of it's going to be foot and ankle strength. How are we able to make contact with the ground? How are we able to produce force and move off of the ground? I think as we age, it's more so important that we have a better understanding of what that's like. And I think overall it can be really helpful, not just on the joints and the musculature and, you know, the connective tissues, but just someone's confidence of, oh, I can still do some of these things. It's still fun. It breaks up the monotony of like, oh, I have to do this strength intervention. So there's quite a few reasons like that. I think it helps with balance. I think it helps with timing. I think it helps with your spatial awareness and proprioception. So just a lot of stuff that you don't necessarily need to get into the weeds with Gen Pop. Just a couple of explanations of, hey, you know, you still have to cross busy streets sometimes. You still have to go up and down stairs. When you go downstairs, that's impact, right? So there's a few things like that where you can just kind of give a few simple explanations as to, you know, where your mindset's at. But there's a whole host of other reasons why I would implement that. When you get into athletics, the other pieces, how do you produce force? Going back to reactive strength index, what does that look like for someone to be explosive off of the ground, especially when the sport is so chaotic? So with stuff like that, I want to make sure that they still have stiff qualities, but also how efficient can you be moving off of the ground? I mean, in sports, when we think about, do athletes compensate? Are they the best compensators? And what does that look like? It's how do you problem solve? And are we able to move around in our space, manipulating objects, right? Moving around the environment and not having to worry about that aspect. I can do any of this in any way I want to because I have the capacity to do so.
Yeah.
Plyometrics might start off, you know, very differently between those. And it also depends on the sport. So it's highly variable, which makes it really difficult to program for people. When they're like, hey, what's your base program for this? It's like, I need more context.
Sure. Yeah. So comparing like kind of general population to athletes, in my experience on the strength training side of things is it doesn't necessarily have to be that different in terms of like exercise selection and key principles, but it's like dosing and volume and recovery. Like I do leg press and I have a female client in her 70s that also does leg press.
Sure.
And it's just different loads, you know what I mean? Obviously there's more nuance to it than that, but on the plyometric side, is there like kind of specific categories of plyos that you're like, I give these types of plyos to athletes versus like Gen Pop can kind of stay here? Is it just kind of dosing and like volume considerations? What are some of the main differences you see between like Gen Pop and athlete kind of plyos?
Yeah, so Intensity definitely matters. Intensity matters. Knee joint angle matters. Ground contact time. All of that stuff matter. I think one of the easiest ways that I can kind of break that down is to just go off of like Matt McInnes Watson's tiered system, because that's one of the easiest ways to explain it in terms of going from light tier, medium tier, ping tier. So light being, just these pogos down here, we're just nice and relaxed. You can have intent, you can still move off of the ground, but you can do that extensively. Medium tier is submax work. That can look in a whole variety of different ways, depending on the different plane of movement that you're in. And then ping tier is your max, your all out. I'm probably not going to give much ping tier to my older demos or gen pop early. I'm going to make sure that they build it out. And the thing with plyometrics is because you're dealing with certain soft tissues, tendons, and other things, it takes months to develop. So your skill might develop and changes you'll see within weeks, but the actual tissue structural changes don't happen for months to years. So you're going to have to be mindful of that, of, how you're building this out. But yeah, so for older populations, I might put them in light tier just to get them used to the rhythm, just to get them used to the impact. And then I'll also go, I didn't say this earlier, deep tier, which isn't technically plyometric, longer ground contact times, but also deeper joint angles. So deeper hip angle, deeper knee joint angle. And then I'll have them like oscillate in certain movement patterns. And then depending on how they present, maybe we'll start pretty shallow and then maybe we'll end up really deep. So it really just depends there. As far as the athletes, depending on where they're at in sport or whatever is required for them, they can have the whole spectrum of that, from light to ping and then deep tier. Often what I see out of athletes is, especially younger athletes, is a decrease in control of their pelvis and trunk. So it's a lot of like, hey, I'm good here, and then I just drop, right? So there's no good control down in the lower ranges. And then ankle joint stiffness, being able to move and propel themselves off of the ground. So I usually start there with athletes and build a profile, depending on what the needs of the sport. So baseball might look a lot different than soccer, might look a lot different than basketball. But when you get to the younger ages, a lot of times there's a real difficulty in getting into and out of like deep positions. If I'm grounding a ball, I need to be able to move and get out of those positions and go. So there's a lot of stuff like that has to go into consideration, where I'm adding in deep tier, but then I might add in different things depending on the needs.
If you're going to program all this stuff in a week or in a session, are you kind of building up and starting with some light tier to warm up? Or do you start just with the ping tier exercise, but lower height or lower intensity? Like, how do you work into some of those bigger efforts? Because I want to get some big plyo efforts with you today. So are we going to like warm up with some like lighter pogos, for example, and then something crazy, or just like scale to something crazy and go up?
I normally scale my way up. So it'll start with the light tier, and then we'll get into some medium tier and then send on the ping tier. But the numbers drop drastically. So like, you could do light tier every day of the week if you wanted to. And then technically you could do deep tier every day of the week if you wanted to. If you've never done this before, don't just do that. But when I get to medium tier and ping tier, that's not something you want to do every time. The ping tier is going to be more so like your max effort sprinting. Or you're only going to want that plugged in a couple times a week. At most.
Okay.
You need your CNS to recover. So then it becomes more than just about like sending it in tissues. It's also your CNS needs to recover in terms of effort.
I want to give people a little blueprint to follow, almost like if this was a big plyo day for someone, like they could almost follow along, build up with us, do some light stuff, some medium stuff, some heavy stuff. So I'll let you be in charge of exercise selection. Okay. But like, let's do a plyo day. We'll kind of talk about the volume and like number of contacts with each. But starting off with something light, like what are we doing? What's the exercise and how many kind of contacts we're looking for?
For somebody that's starting out, sometimes and you can look at this in a couple of ways. You can say, hey, we're going to program this out for X amount of contacts in light tier. Or you could say, this is the amount of yardage I'm going to use. Those numbers, if you're pretty seasoned in this, they're going to look pretty similar, whether you're using distance or whether you're using ground contact time. But some people, they don't want to think about how many contacts.
Yeah.
So they'll just go.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But in terms of light, I mean, we can get into, let's say, 100, 150, 200 reps of light tier pretty easy.
Okay.
On the medium tier side, that might look like 60 to 80, 80 to 120. On the ping tier side, you might be 40 to 60.
Okay. And then
In terms of like across all of the different variations of them.
is this across a week or a session?
Depending on where you're at, like if you're pretty seasoned, a session. So like me,
Okay.
yeah, that would be like a session.
That's a lot more than I've done. Gonna be a fun day for me.
No, it's not that. So, I mean, I also like to look at it as like, if you were to look at a boxer training,
Yeah.
they can go grab a jump rope and be there for how long?
Well, sure. I ran
You know,
I
so-
ran 10 miles this morning, so that's a lot of
Oh, you're gonna be cooked then.
a lot of low. Well, that's a lot of low tier
Yes.
exposures, right?
Yeah.
Do you think is it something like a light tier, pogo for 200 contacts? Is that kind of redundant in the context of distance running, or do you think it's still much more challenging in comparison that it's worth doing?
I think it's worth doing, but I wouldn't have you do 200 pogos per se.
Okay.
I would change the light tier exercises within it so that your stimulus is going to be a bit different than what you were getting at when you were running.
Got it.
So I'm going to have you going in diagonals. I'm going to have you going laterally, medially. So I'm going to change I'm going to have you switching.
Okay.
Like there's other elements to it where you can definitely have a huge positive impact to how you're moving. And that's honestly something that I recommend, especially for people that are distance running, is that aspect, because the goal should be, hey, how do we make you more efficient off of the ground, right?
Yeah.
If you're using these tendons and these other structures where you're going to be having that stored elastic energy, how can you best use that to your advantage? And that's ground contact time.
Yeah.
Even if you're shaving off, really minuscule numbers over however many steps you're taking, that ends up becoming a bigger number at the end of it,
Sure.
right? So it all adds up, and that's what we're looking at. How's your tissue health, and how are you going to move efficiently?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're the coach in the Plyos today. What am I doing?
We'll start off pretty simple. Let's just go with pogos forward and pogos backwards, but let's go 20 and 20.
20 yards down, 20 yards back.
20 contacts down.
20 contacts.
We'll
20 back.
do it pretty light because we're gonna build this up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you recommend shoed, unshoed? Doesn't matter.
For here right now, let's go in shoes. Sometimes if someone's beat up, I want them out of shoes.
Okay.
Sometimes I think that's just good for them to just be barefoot and to get working through the feet, especially if we're in these like high-soled shoes all the time.
Okay.
I want that different type of a stimulus. Now, that will also change the more intense the jumps get. So if we're going to pink tier, let's say we start off in light tier and we're without shoes, eventually if we get to pink tier, then I'm gonna want shoes back on.
Got it.
And that's just because of the intensity. There's a lot of inhibition and apprehension to really full sending off of a bare foot.
Sure.
So we're going back into a shoe.
Got it. All right, well, let's get some pogos in.
What I really like about backwards though is that intent part where you have to push off the ground to go backwards.
Yes.
So in moments where you asked before, like, hey, how do I get somebody to push? That's one of them.
How many rounds?
Oh, we're moving on.
That's it? All right.
But see, that's already 40 reps.
True. Yeah.
So, or
Go
40
ahead.
contacts.
Yeah,
So we're already moving along in what that looks like.
So now we're at 72.
Yeah. Dude, these go by actually pretty quick.
Yeah.
Something that's similar to like a hopscotch. So you'll go 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1.
I don't know if I'm
Okay.
getting that.
This is great. This is great.
That was the weirdest one to me so far.
Yes. Okay. So when you started out kicking underneath you,
Yeah, and then I pulled up a little more.
then
yeah.
you pulled up more. Yes. So that's actually very, very common, and I see that all the time. When you go here, the direction of force of your foot is going to go straight down. That's a harder position to be in, and it's a harder position to get out of.
Yes.
Versus if you're here and you're dorsiflexed, you put yourself in a better position to keep going and pushing off the ground.
Yeah.
So I like to see, often I won't cue right away. I want to see what the natural strategy is.
Yeah.
And then if I need to interject, I will. But some things just take time. Some people are like, hey, this was like the weirdest thing or the hardest thing I've done so far. I'm like, good. You're always going to be building. So let's say we had 5 different plyos, 3 look really good and 2 don't.
Yes.
For the first 3, going back to intent, are we able to move off of the ground? Are we able to hit? The other ones that don't feel great, I'm never usually, unless it's something egregious, I'm usually not too worried about it, because for me, that person is usually at where they need to be. It's going to take a while for them to develop the skills of, all right, this is more intense now. I don't know how to organize my body in the air just yet. I'm still figuring out the movement pattern, and that just takes reps.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm usually okay. Like I'm just watching, obviously, to make sure that nothing's off. And then I'm checking in with the person, of course, like, hey, how does this feel and everything. But I'm never too worried about that aspect of, oh, this one felt really weird this time.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Cool.
Because sometimes over-coaching gets in the way, over-cueing gets in the way. I'd rather just watch and then just see that over time.
Do you use constraints much with, like, you know, hopping over hurdles or cones, that kind of thing?
Yes and no. That part really does depend. Hurdles, I think, get a little muddy if I really want something out of it, right? Like if it's me, I used to be a hurdler, so if I want to do hurdle hops, for example, and I'm trying to organize myself, again, getting back into the air and getting into different positions, then yeah, that's altogether different. But I'll see people use like the babiest of cones and they're like way above. I'm like, why is the cone even there?
Right.
Or like the hurdles, they're faced the wrong way. It's like all of the, it's like all of these things that don't need to be there.
Yeah.
So again, going back to context on that, but I'll give you an example of a constraint I used in deep tier. I suppose we could wait for it for them, but depending on the position of the person. So like if I have somebody in deep tier and they can't figure out spacing and they're leaning forward, I might give them a mid ball. So that way they can help organize their spacing so it's less, sporadic.
Yeah.
And then they have to control how their trunk is and their torso is because of the ball.
Sure.
So I'll use things like that all the time of like, all right, this is way too all over the place. Let me go ahead and add something in so it helps them be a bit more controlled in the movement.
Gotcha. So bounding versus hopping versus leaping, like I see all these terms thrown around in Plyos. What's the difference between those things? To most people, they sound like the same word, leap, bound, hop. How do you differentiate?
So before I start a session, and I know we didn't do this today, but usually when I'm working with somebody, I tell them my definitions right from the beginning. Hey, this is what these are. As we go, I'm going to continue to hammer away at this so that there's consistency. The last thing I want to do is program something and it's off and they do the wrong thing and it's too intense. So I never want to put anybody in that position. So a leap is anything 2 leg to 2 leg. So when I said hurdle hops earlier, it's hurdle leaps, but it's anything 2 leg to 2 leg. Bound is a single action to the other leg. So you're still bipedal in that, but it's alternating your one into the other. And then a hopping action is single leg to the same leg.
Got it.
So unipedal, I guess the other one is still unipedal, but alternating, but yeah. But in a hop, it's same leg to the same leg. And then a jump for me anyway is like a catch-all term. When you get into broad jumps, box jumps, any of that, it's just they're such like mainstream standard exercises that I'm like, let it just be it. Let that be its thing. Like I'm not going to try and change everything. I guess some of my goal with this is to just show that there are more options, right? There's more directions you can push into. There's different rhythms and patterns. It doesn't have to be, oh, we're just in this tier and we're just in that tier.
Yeah.
So I think it's also really helpful to figure out, how is my rhythm? Am I able to relax in the air?
Yeah.
And that part's really important because this is something that's really not covered in running as much as I think it should be, and that's just relaxation. You want to be able to strike off the ground and then relax in the air and then stiffen up, pop off the ground. Like you don't want to be rigid the whole time. And then you also don't want to be on the flip side where everything is just like so soft that you're just like hitting the ground without any sort of intent. You're not pushing.
Yeah.
So I think plyos are a great medium to help you organize and figure that out.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we hit like maybe 150-ish light tier. We're now moving up to, you call medium tier,
Yeah.
Medium tier. And how many contacts are we going to hit in this range?
Probably around 60 to 80.
60 to 80?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
So it was more of a gather and a punch.
Sure.
And then in the second one, moving through, alternating through the arms. So either works. It depends on what your comfort is. I come from triple jump. I come from that side of track and field. So for me, it's really comfortable to gather and punch.
Yeah.
When you're trying to pick up speed, going back to what is the goal, then you might change your strategy depending on what that looks like.
Sure.
If I'm trying to go more horizontal and I'm trying to get into something that's a bit more on the velocity side, then I'm probably going to go back to that alternating arm swing.
Got it.
Yeah.
Do you think the specificity matters that much for someone like, for me, like as a distance runner? Like this stuff, I think is good from like a developing general qualities.
Sure.
But I feel like it's still kind of far removed from like marathon running in terms of specificity.
Sure.
Do you think it matters for someone like me? Would you tell me to do more of that kind of like bipedal, get the arm swing, or just do whatever feels good?
I think whatever feels good, but I think for a lot of people, that way is going to feel more natural.
Sure.
So I'm saying that it's okay to do either.
Yeah.
I'm sure some people will see like maybe a video of me or somebody else and we're gathering and we're hitting and then they try and force that position. And it's like, yeah, you might not need that.
Got it.
You might not need that quality or skill. So I at least wanted to highlight, hey, there are multiple ways to do this.
Gotcha.
And that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
No longer can I remain earthbound, spacing running pain.
Oh god, that's gonna be fun to play back. Oh man, you can tell I usually run in a straight line, huh?
Yeah. But that's why I like to change the angles on people. But it doesn't have to be that hard either. Like, right, we're getting out, we're actually covering quite a bit of distance.
Yeah.
That can be small. Like I could have said, hey, doesn't need to look like me going out doing that. You can literally
Yeah.
keep it small and just hit and let that be that. That's what makes all of this so confusing and I guess hard for people, is just like knowing when to plug things in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like as long as you're hitting the right general category, you're not screwing up too bad.
Yeah.
Is that fair, you think?
Yeah. Yeah. At the end of the day, you just don't want large gaps. And like, hey, I started here and then I ended up with the, like, you don't want that huge difference in whatever it is that you're doing.
Sure.
And ultimately it's like, hey, are we actually making this person a bit more robust? Are we actually helping maybe some of the other movement patterns that they don't get much, which can actually have an impact on how they move?
Yeah.
Right? Like people don't often think about, let's take acceleration and you're down in a deep position, or even with squatting, like your adductors are heavily involved. You can hit adductors through Plyos. It's a different stimulus. Are you adding that in? Are we thinking about things in that way?
Yeah. Well, that's one of the questions I had for you. With different plyos, you're going to be more like kind of lower leg, like calf and ankle dominant,
Sure.
versus knee dominant versus hip dominant.
Sure.
Light tier, medium tier, pink tier, deep tier. There's so many combinations and permutations, and it's like just overwhelming how many plyos there are to choose from.
Sure.
How do you kind of sort that out? Where someone runs through some plyos and they're like, I don't know if I got enough stimulus for my knee in medium tier. Like, do you have to get that detailed with it? Or if you hit a couple of big principles, do you think you're going to be okay generally?
I think for most people, if you hit the big principles, you're good generally.
Okay.
In rehab, I think this is where we get things wrong all the time, is because we already have a tough enough time, like understanding what the definitions are, that we don't then know how to apply it over. And then we don't know what stuff's supposed to look like. So there's gaps. You see the starting point, you see the end point, and you can see where they miss steps along the way. If I have somebody with an ankle issue, eventually I'm going to want them to be active in hitting and using that ankle, and I want that kind of stiffness in a multitude of directions, especially if it's someone with like an ankle sprain. I want to know that they can get into those positions and get out of it and not have to worry about the laxity from like a sprain.
Yeah.
Right. So, and the confidence, like there's a lot that goes into that. For an ACL, I'm going to change it depending on even what the graft type is. So quad's super important for ACL rehab. It's probably like the most important thing aside from full extension range of motion, like, but they go hand in hand. But aside from just that, what's happening at the quad tendon, patellar tendon, or hamstring tendon, depending on what the graft is, those plyos might look a lot different because of exposure, because of the emphasis on that tissue. And then when you're getting into, well, what's a bit more hip dominant, once you get into ping tier, sprinting, acceleration, into max speed, well, are we hitting those markers too to not just challenge the CNS, but how do we organize? And I don't know that there's like a huge direct transfer, but it's not going to hurt to also have that included. Got it. And then come back down.
That's not great. Oh, yeah, it's hard.
It's hard. Yeah. But you're going to hit a threshold. That's the point.
Yeah.
Can I find my threshold? When you get into ping tier, that's information for you. This is what that feels like.
Yeah.
And so that's your gauge. That's where you're at. We'll go horizontal to vertical, horizontal to vertical.
Okay. That's going to be getting to the knee more, right?
Yeah, because it's going to be more of a deceleration in the beginning to pop you up, but that's also what's going to be the thing that pops you up.
Yeah.
That stiffness of being able to hit. It's here, and then up.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I have someone with some knee involvement, I'll do XL decel leaps. So I'll have them go forward, pop up.
Yeah.
So that way we're still hitting that as a mark. Again, what was my goal for the session?
Yeah.
Who's the person in front of me? And then all of these are scalable is the thing.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, here's a whole host of varieties, but they can start small and build them all out. And I think that's another important piece. It's always like, well, damn, hops are so intense, bounds are so intense. It's like, they don't have to be. You can start them off small.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything is scalable.
Yeah. The number of contacts, like to circle back to the beginning, like 100 to 200, kind of light. Would you start even like kind of a novice at those numbers that are just all kind of scaled, or would you start with lower volume?
I think starting off on the lower end of those rep ranges is really appropriate. If I'm seeing somebody for the first time, I'm probably going to go with light tier. If there's no big history that I'm worried about as far as an injury is concerned, then I'll probably do light, medium, and deep tier. I'm probably not throwing ping tier in for a minute until I see different qualities coming around, until I see the profile of the athlete. They're probably getting this in whatever sport they're playing, but I also want to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
Much like I'm not going to have somebody just max sprint like right away when I meet them, unless they're already in their sport doing their certain thing. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff I'm looking for. This is kind of the same way in that.
Dude, that's like hard and awkward. I might even need to do that one bilateral for a bit.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to crush you, but like.
No, you got that. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard.
Just trying to catch my breath.
Yours looked awesome though.
Thank you.
Like I don't think most people watching that realize how tough that is.
It's definitely not easy, and that's not like a boasting. Like it's humbling.
Yeah, that's impressive.
It's a humbling exercise. I ran 400-meter hurdles and 110 high hurdles at this height, so like my my perception of like what I could run is really skewed. I never thought of myself as someone who was really fast. I was just springy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and to be able to do hurdles at your height, like you got to be pretty springy.
and that was kind of it. It was the athleticism and the springiness that kind of carried me through.
How old are you, by the way?
37. Funny story. So I had somebody reach out to me and they were like, hey, you know, how would you program this for someone who's like around 40 years old? And I'm like, bro, I'm 37.
Yeah.
I'm not far from that. I'd program it the same way I program it for me.
Right? Oh, did you want to do any deep tier or you want to go into excels? What do you think?
We can do some deep tier.
Yeah? All right.
That would actually be really nice to do after this.
Show the people what deep tier is about.
Simplest thing, just dropping down into just a squat jump, but like just in a deep tier position, just staying low, oscillating in that deep position.
Okay.
Big things that I see here, we talked about it earlier, where I see a lot of eccentric control issues with younger athletes. So I'll program that in where I'm like, I don't want you to move. See this line in your pelvis, you're staying there. So if you're coming up, I want you to hit and I don't want you to move past that.
Yeah.
Just because I want them to gain control there. And then eventually, yeah, we'll build it down and we'll drop lower. But for the most part, I like doing that with people because it gives me a visual understanding and assessment of what's going on.
With something like this, is it more about like soft, like quiet landings, or is it still like trying to be kind of violently attack the floor in those positions?
I would say that there's a middle ground in there somewhere. Let's go 15.
15.
I don't know what number I'm at. And then same thing here. Just going into a split stance. Same thing, staying upright. Don't go into a super hinge position. 12, 10 to 12. You can change what that looks like. You can rear foot elevate on the split, front leg elevate on the split.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll offset. So even on the squat one, I'll elevate one leg, have them switch.
Yeah.
Just add a little bit more stress and emphasis on one joint versus the other.
Yeah. I feel like none of those things, well, some of the higher intensity ones were tough, but for the most part, no single thing was like that bad. But they've added up. Like I feel like kind of worked.
So the same ones we did, you can always add a med ball. You don't need anything super heavy. Anywhere between 4 to 8 pounds on a med ball is totally fine. If I add in movement, then you totally increase the intensity of what that is.
Yeah.
So you don't need much weight. I had somebody who was all over the place. So there's one that I have people do where it's like a frog leap, where you're down and you're just moving through the whole foot and letting the shin drop.
Yeah.
Well, he was all over the place where he like was short and then was launching himself forward. So he was flying. So I just gave him a med ball and I said, hold this. And he couldn't do that because he had to account for the ball being in front of him.
One I've programmed for people a bit is with a med ball to like skater with the ball. I find that is helpful. Like it's easier to control.
Yes.
Yeah, this feels really good.
I did this workout one time. It was like a group fitness workout. And they had a 25-pound like med ball into that. And they were like, go deeper. And
that's heavy.
I'm just like, this is a lot going into the body. Like you're giving this to everybody here. Like that's nuts.
Yeah.
But again, the intensity, the profiling. Yeah. But I do think that's great.
Yeah, light one.
Yeah. I do think that's great. And I think it can help your momentum. I think it can help your rotation.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of reasons why you would add that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Speaking of like adding weight, at what point does something transition from plyo to not plyo with like, trap bar jumps, Olympic lifts, ballistic stuff? I'm curious like how you categorize those. Do they touch on a lot of the same things? Are they way different? And like why do one versus the other?
Okay, so true plyometrics, we'll start there with the main definition, is it's less than a quarter of a second and it's a landing to a takeoff sequence. Like the plyometric has to be started with you being airborne into the movement. So you're not just starting on the ground doing a counter movement jump.
Yeah.
So big distinction there. It's more tendinous than it is muscularly driven. So again, going off of that stored elastic energy and then using that to propel yourself off of the ground. So that's why it's important. Like you get into this relaxation phase and then you stiffen up right before you hit. And then you're using that stored elastic energy to move. So that and the ground contact time is super important. That's what's gonna drive your adaptations for this.
Yeah.
When you get into, let's say, banded jumps or like trap bar, anything like that, you're extending the time that you're on the ground. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just know that that's a different stimulus.
Yeah.
Than maybe, what the definition is. Like, let's keep things the same because we'll often get these catch-all terms for things and it's like, well, that's not doing what you think it's doing. And if that's the case, that can under-prepare you for whatever stimulus, sport, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
Now, I think I shit on banded jumps all the time. I'm just gonna be honest. Yeah. I don't love banded jumps, but I don't love banded jumps because there's a world where it alters your jump mechanics, where you're spending too much time on the ground, you're relying on the band, and people will pull down on the band. So now the rhythm and cadence of that is very different. Mm-hmm. That's not to say that you can't improve your ability to propel off of the ground, because there is research surrounding that, and they do find that when you do banded jumps in a more intentful way, back to intent, then you can actually get off the ground faster. So I know that exists. I know that there's a difference. I know that sometimes in rehab, you just want the stimulus there for proprioception and for nerves and all of that stuff. I get all of that. That's cool. But sometimes we put a little bit more emphasis into those realms than just doing the thing.
Yeah.
Just spend time doing the actual thing. And then when you get into loaded jumps with dumbbells or trap bar, a bit more muscularly driven, but you're getting into that stretch of the tendon. You're still going to use it to propel yourself. So it is more muscularly driven. It's just a different stimulus.
Yeah.
All useful. I use them.
Yeah.
I do box jumps. Just know what they're for.
Sure.
That's all I ask.
I came across a paper that was, this was geared towards distance runners. I think it was, I think the test outcome was maybe a 5K time trial, 5K or 10K. But it was comparing the effect of a plyometric program versus adding sprints on the running economy.
Yep.
And at least in this paper, it was like, I think their argument in conclusion was they were pretty comparable in terms of improving the 5K or 10K performance and their running economy and that kind of thing. Obviously, there's going to be some limitations and nuance to that, but I'm curious what your kind of thought on that is with like for a distance runner or kind of a gen pop person maybe that's not a speed and power athlete. Comparing and contrasting adding Plyos to a program versus just like doing a bunch of sprint work. And if you're also doing a bunch of sprint work, does that change how you would dose Plyos? Because like there's only so much time and energy in a day and stuff too. So like I'll let you kind of brain dump on that kind of for the context of like me as a distance runner or someone else is just like trying to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah. I can go in two different directions with that. I also want to know what the person enjoys. Like going back into those factors, I think both are useful. Sprinting at the end of the day, when you're getting into really fast running, those are plyometrics, right? Like your ground contact time is decreased, you're moving off of the ground. So for me, those are very similar. If I have a distance runner, but it's on the shorter distance end, and by shorter distance, going into your mile, 5K, 10K, those sorts of things, then I might want to include some sprint work so that I raise their capacity. In general, I always want to see someone raise their capacity for what they can do, especially top end. Like if you're just faster than somebody, then the running economy can come along. You're always going to be faster than someone else. So I always love that just kind of as a concept. But some distance runners, marathoners, like when you start pushing out into the really high-end running, high distance running, that's not their thing. Like that's not something that they really want to do. It's not familiar to them. In which case, sometimes it's a component of my atmosphere or whatever. I only have a little bit of time, so cool, just get in some plyo work, right? And you can still improve your running economy that way, going back to, I imagine, what you were reading, and that's, are you efficient off of the ground? Because that's going to come up in your contacts. So just improving it that way. It really just kind of depends on going back to the profile. So I can go either way on that. But time is important. If I'm short on time, let's just hit some plyos. Let's hit some quality plyos, get you moving off of the ground, and then go from there.
So like today, we were talking about the number of contacts and the different tiers and that kind of thing. If I'm like, hey, we're also going to do 10 by 40 meter sprints or something like that, is that then take the category of the ping tier, for example? Does that influence how you would program the plyo volume going into like a sprint session kind of thing?
Absolutely. When you get into ping tier and you get into really intense plyometrics, that can definitely have an impact on what you're doing in some of the later stages. Now you can do some, you just don't want to build out and make that the whole thing. Like you're going to be gassed by the time you get to max sprints. Right? So just want to be mindful of that. Where you do kind of want some of the exposure, you want to warm up, you want to get your system primed for the task. You just don't want to overdo it and make that kind of the actual workout. And then double down on it with something as intense as max effort sprinting. And with plyometrics, those might look a little bit different. So if we're saying, because I differentiate the two, or I separate the two, like if we're to look at acceleration versus sprinting, I'll have those in the same week, but the plyos for one are going to look different than the plyos for the other. Not all the time, like in the light tier stuff and some of the prep for it, not as much. But once we start getting into the workout, then I'm going to be in deeper joint angles. I'm going to be pushing out. I'm going to be doing stuff that's more so going to mirror or mimic what acceleration is going to be like. And then on the flip side, I'm going to be working on limb velocity, limb speed. I'm going to be working on stuff that's going to more mirror what max velocity sprinting's like.
Gotcha.
And I'm sure there could be a ton of arguments made about any of that. It's just that's how I program it.
Yeah.
That's what feels good to me. That's what I've used with people, and I've seen that work really well. So that's what I roll with.
Yeah. Let's do one side by side just because I want to see how much you got me. I'm just going to drop it, and when it, like the go is when it slaps the ground. All right, so you got me in the 15-yard excel,
Yeah.
but I think with the plyo warm-up, I felt pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't terrible.
No. No, this stuff works really well as a warm-up, man. Like building up into whatever the tasks are, and people just start moving better and feeling better. So it's like, dude, just build it out nicely,
Yeah.
stay consistent, all's good.
In terms of sprinting work, just a couple quick questions for you.
Sure.
Max velo sprinting versus sub-max sprinting. How much do you program one versus the other, like 10 out of 10 versus 7 out of 10? And then in terms of like volume considerations, like how much sprint work does it take, especially minimum effective dose?
Mm-hmm.
Like if I want to get faster, I don't have a ton of sprint experience. How much sprinting do I realistically need to do to see a big improvement?
Yeah, so sprinting needs to be consistent. That needs to be a weekly event. I think the top end sprint speed drops off after every I'm sure it's variable in there, but it's like 10 days, but I'd put it between 8 and 12 where you're gonna start seeing a drop. As far as like minimum effective, I separate them out like I mentioned before where I'll do acceleration and we get up to a pretty solid intensity with acceleration. But I do that and max velocity, so at least 2 times a week of working on that stuff, yeah.
And in terms of like how many reps or distance, like, you know, with strength now, everyone's like, you know, just if you do 1 working set 3 days a week, like that's a good minimum effective dose. What would that be for sprinting? Is it 3 sprints, 10 sprints, etc.?
What will happen sometimes is you'll feel yourself start to break down and then you'll see the movement quality start to break down.
Yeah.
That's where your threshold is.
I like that because when people ask me about like strength training volume and that kind of stuff, how many sets should I do? I'm like, if you give me 1 like really good quality set and then you just keep going after it, like you're gonna reach a point where you're not coming close to that performance anymore and you're done. Like if you hit 10 out of, like if you do a working set, you get 10 reps and then your second set, you get 9 and your third set, you get 9. Like you could try a 4th set and that 4th set, you get like 6, like, all right, you're done. Like you're not getting you're not reaching close enough to like your best effort.
Yeah.
Some people it might take 4 sets, some people it might take 2 sets.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I go with strength. It sounds like that with speed a little bit of like just as much volume as you can get at sufficient quality, and when the quality drops, cut it.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, more or less. So if I'm doing max velocity sprinting, I'll go out and I'll test the first 2-3 reps. Where am I at? How am I feeling? Where am I at in space? Are things starting to break down? Am I putting out high enough quality and sustaining it? And then I hit hard after that. And then I ride that for as long as I can. And when things start to fall off, I might get another rep or 2 in to see if I can clean things up, because, you know, if I feel it breaking down, it's like I don't want to just stop there. I might want to do another 2 or 3 to see if I can build back some consistency. And just build my capacity for that, and then call it.
I'm bad enough at sprinting. The few like big sprint workouts I've done have been a little bit more submaximal, a little bit higher volume, and I found sometimes I've hit my best efforts on like my 10th rep. But that's probably because I suck at it and they're not like 10 out of 10. But I know some like really great sprinters, like Coach Q Physio was in here doing sprints earlier. He's telling me about some of the sprint workouts where he'll hit like four hard efforts and like he feels pretty good about that. So do you think that trend is pretty reliable with like more novice sprinters maybe doing a little bit more volume, but like as your outputs get bigger and bigger, you can't handle as much? Is that a consistent trend, or is it just like really variable? Everyone is so different.
I think it's variable depending on what the task is. Like someone might really struggle in their acceleration, and that's going to have an impact on what their top end looks like. Versus someone else who them all might look great, and then in top end they have a hard time organizing and moving off of the ground.
Yeah.
So in that way it can be difficult. But like, dude, you could crush 10 meters, 10 yards, whatever, just on starts and work on that.
Yeah.
And that be like a solid session. It's going to come down to reps and what your capacity is for that. I think it's highly variable, but
Yeah.
get a number in.
Yeah.
Don't just do 1 or 2, like actually get some quality work in. And then on the flip side, I like longer sprints when you get out to 100 meter, 120 meters, 150 meters, because I think that can also help relaxation and how someone moves.
Yeah.
Versus if you're just doing acceleration work, someone might get out and they're really straining. But if you have the time and you can really push out, then you can dial in and say, okay, how am I breathing? Is my face staying relaxed?
Yeah.
My shoulders staying relaxed? Am I relaxed through the arms and through the hands? And how does that translate down to the lower body? And it's easy to move off the ground. So I think you need both sides of it. It's not just I'm here or I'm here.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think to wrap up the day, 1 failure set of pendulum squats. What do you think?
Let's do it.
Just one and done. That looked good.
Thanks.
Does it feel okay?
Yeah. Oh, dude, you're super low.
How's that roller back there feel for you?
It's interesting.
I've been playing around with this setup because for me, I've been using the pendulum as like my main squat variation.
Yeah.
Lately in my program, like I know a lot of people, they'll back squat or they'll have other squat variations, and for them the pendulum is like a quad accessory.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's like this is my squat.
I've never
Right now?
seen anybody use this.
Well, just
Like this.
it just hinges you forward a little bit more.
Yeah.
So it makes it like you just get your hips in it a little bit more. It's like a little bit less quad bias, which I know some people was like the whole point of the pendulum is quads. I'm like I know, but it's my primary squat.
Get away from.
I want
know.
I want a little more glutes in there. It feels good. I'm also, you can relate to this, a small guy, and it gets me a little closer to the handle, so I can really like pull and crank on it.
Interesting.
Versus without this, it's like way out there, and I feel like I'm sitting way back in the car, you know. So
yeah.
I just like being it just feels better all around for me. But
Yeah.
in case you are watching and wondering, it's just it's a subtle tweak. It doesn't do that much. It just feels good.
I do like it though.
Since we're doing quads, building up to a quick like tough set of quads, I think the ACL is relevant. I
Yep.
know you're something of an ACL rehab kind of expert,
Ish.
and
No.
and we don't have time to like go through everything that goes into ACL rehab.
Sure.
But I'm curious, like with you being kind of like the cutting edge of it and researching it and it being your area of expertise, what are some things that like are new or interesting, or things you were wrong about with the ACL, or things that people get wrong? Like what's some of the like really fresh stuff that you think people that maybe already know something about ACL rehab that maybe they've missed out on?
Damn, that's such a good question. I think more so the cutting edge stuff that is tough to speak about, and an area that I'll just start off like with an area that I lack is a lot more force plate data information. And that's a lot of it's just due to access. And when you get into some of these companies like a Hawkins or a Vault, and this isn't a shot at them, there's just so many metrics to pull from. But when you have someone like a Matt Jordan or like a Coach Bot, like any of them, they do phenomenal with any of that. So for someone who really wants to dive into that aspect of ACL rehab, I highly recommend them. But I think it's not so much just about like cutting edge. I think we just get wrong a lot of basics wrong in rehab, where we're still working on flexion instead of extension in the beginning. We still don't have an understanding of swelling within the knee joint and getting that out of there, because that's going to have an impact on how the quad functions and fires. And that's AMI, arthrogenic muscle inhibition. So I think basics like that, having an understanding of that is huge as far as how someone recovers, because how you start off is going to play a big role in how they're able to do in the later stages. The other thing that didn't have enough emphasis on before, and I think where I've done really well, is with differentiating the tendon grafts. That's always been in the back of people's minds in terms of symptoms, but not necessarily as a consideration for what do our exercises and interventions look like to appropriately dose and address for those things, right?
Yeah.
So knowing, what's more effective for the quad to turn back on in the early stages and how it's going to be strong in that development, but then also how is the tissue developing at the graft site, or maybe it's a hamstring tendon graft and that's where they pulled from. So how are you rebuilding that, because that matters. And then working the contralateral leg. As far as the research goes, within 2 years, people usually have an injury to the contralateral side. So it's like there's just so many things to think about. But I think paying attention to the graft types is super important in how somebody recovers. Yeah.
Is do they usually take it from the hamstring, or?
Depends on the athlete.
Okay.
Yeah. So the kind of gold standard is patellar tendon graft, super robust. But people get a lot of anterior knee pain if people have a history of patellar fractures or any sort of patellar tendonitis. They might not do that graft. Quad tendon graft is super strong. A lot of quad weakness for a while, can be variable and irritable. Super strong and robust, but because of the impact on the quad, they don't usually use that unless it's, a multiple injury kind of event. Maybe it's their second or third ACL rupture, and so then they'll use that. And then as far as hamstring, they try to avoid quad involvement, anterior knee irritation, and depending on the sport for the athlete.
My plan is like warm up and then one failure set. If this feels like a working set, just send it, but up to you. Oh yeah. Oh. All right, we're going.
Am I doing one more, or are we good?
Whatever you got. Let's see how many you can do. All right. Come on. One more.
Yeah. Oh shit.
Push. Hell yeah, you got it.
Oh my God.
This is payback for those horizontal to vertical hops.
That is really funny.
So this is very suboptimal of me, but kind of just for fun, honestly. This all started about 5 weeks back. I was
doing this one?
Yeah, put that on there. Yeah. I just put 4 plates in the pendulum, and I was like, I want to just AMRAP 4 plates, and I got 23, and I was like, pretty happy with that.
Who does that?
And I came back in the next week and I was like, I should go heavier, like drop it down to 10. But I was like, I wonder if I could just add 5 and get 23 again, like try to progressive overload the set of 23, as random as that number is. And so for the last 5 weeks, I've just kept adding 5 pounds and doing 23 reps. Yeah. And the goal is just keep doing that until I fail. And so I started at 4. I've done 4 plus 5, 4 plus 10, 4 plus 15, 4 plus 20. Now we're at 4 plus 25. So I'm going to attempt 23 reps at 4 plus 25. I want to be confident, but man, legs are feeling it.
Come on. Push.
Oh, fuck.
You got it, dude. Come on.
Oh, fuck. Jesus Christ. That was a hard one this week.
Everything about this is absolutely nuts.
Holy shit. I wouldn't have gotten that if it wasn't at the camera and you. Thank you for being here, making that
thank you for
possible.
Me. Yeah.
Thank you for the education.
Yeah.
I had a blast. Derek Garza, everybody, amazing PT. Reach out if he can help you with anything. Thanks again, brother. That was great.
Thanks, man.